The fog covered the forest of Beacon Hills like a ghostly shroud. Stiles' flashlight flickered, casting twisted shadows between the trees. Scott McCall ran after him, feeling the damp earth soak into his sneakers. This was madness. It always was when Stiles had an idea. Stiles, wait! This is a terrible idea. Don't complain, McCall. We came to find a body, and we're going to find it. Stiles' nervous laughter faded into the crunch of leaves. Scott huffed, moving forward blindly in the darkness. Then, a sound tore through the air like an invisible claw, a deep, guttural growl, too real. The two of them froze. "Tell me that was you," Stiles whispered. "When in my life have I ever made a sound like that?" A howl, close, too close. Scott felt his stomach tighten as he saw something moving between the trees, eyes glowing like embers. "Run," he whispered, but Stiles didn't move. The creature leapt from the underbrush in an instant. Scott fell backward, the air rushing from his lungs. He tried to move, but his body locked up as he saw the open jaws, the fangs ready to tear him apart. But it never reached him. Stiles screamed. There was a flash of moonlight reflecting off blood, a howl of pain, and the crunch of breaking bone. Then, silence. The beast disappeared into the darkness of the forest, leaving only Stiles' body on the ground. Scott crawled to him. "Stiles, come on, say something!" His friend gasped, his skin damp with cold sweat. His eyes, usually filled with sarcastic humor, were unfocused, his breathing erratic. "Scott, it hurts." The wound in his side wasn't bleeding as it should. It pulsed, as if something more was happening beneath the skin. Scott didn't know it yet, but in that moment, the bite of an alpha was beginning to transform his best friend into something neither of them understood. That night, Stiles barely slept. Scott didn't either. Not just out of worry, but because every time he closed his eyes, he could swear he heard the sound of bones shifting. And in the deepest part of the night, a howl echoed through the neighborhood, long and heart-wrenching. Scott bolted upright. When he entered Stiles' room, he found him standing in front of the mirror, his breathing ragged. His hands trembled, his face was slick with sweat. "Scott," he whispered, his voice broken. The reflection showed something different. His eyes glowed with a wild amber light. His fingers had sharpened into black claws, and when he opened his mouth, his fangs were too long for a human jaw. Scott felt his chest tighten. "God, Stiles, what's happening to you?" But his friend had no answer. His body trembled, his breathing quickened, and suddenly, rage erupted from within him. A second later, the mirror shattered into pieces, glass shards scattering across the floor. Stiles gasped, his hands bloody, staring at the fragmented reflection of his new face. Something inside him had changed, something he couldn't control. Scott knew they needed help, and only one name came to mind: Derek Hale. That night, they searched for him at the old train station. When they arrived, Stiles could barely stand. His hands clutched his head as if trying to hold something inside his skull. And then, Derek's voice echoed in the darkness. "You shouldn't be here." Scott spun around. Derek watched them with the same predator-like intensity as always, his brow furrowed in an expression bordering on exasperation. "Derek, we need help." The man studied them for a moment, then fixed his gaze on Stiles. His nose flared slightly, as if he could smell something in the air. "Who bit you?" Stiles didn't answer. He could barely stand upright. "Derek, please," Scott pleaded. The werewolf sighed. "He's entering the first phase. If he doesn't learn to control it, he's going to kill someone." Scott's heart stopped for a second. "What?" New betas can't hold back. Instinct is stronger than reason. If he loses control during a full moon, someone will die. Stiles looked up, his breathing uneven. "I don't want to hurt anyone." Derek crossed his arms. "Then you'd better learn fast." That night, under the waxing moon, Stiles Stilinski, the boy who had always been the weakest, the smallest, the most sarcastic, became something else. He became a wolf.